We'll get straight to the purpose of my presentation, which is to challenge the notion of the Betrieb as a single corporate unified actor, to challenge this notion from a micropolitical perspective, particularly with respect to organizational change processes, which is one of my research subjects. And the agenda will be, it works. The agenda will be, I first would like to define micropolitics and organizational change, very short, and then turn to the challenge, the micropolitical challenge to the Betrieb as a collective actor from this micropolitical perspective. And then a question arises whether micropolitical dynamics might be conducive to corporate change or destructive. And I would like to turn to the concepts of coalitions at the end of the presentation, which I would like to consider as a bridge, maybe a methodological method or ontological or conceptual bridge between micro and macro concepts of organizational change politics, and give some conclusions. So let's start with some definitions. I use micropolitics here in two ways, which is familiar to most of us. First, as an analytical construct or a perspective to analyze collective or organized behavior from the micro level, at the individual level, so as an analytical construct. And I use it in a way to describe empirical phenomenon of social life. I think that's very well known to you. And micropolitical behavior, I will stick to a very old, but still, in my view, a precise definition. Burns defined behavior as political when others are made use of as resources in competitive situations. So in my view, micropolitical behavior is characterized by self-interest behavior, but also by getting influence over others in specific situations, which are situations of conflict. And organizational change, already informed by a, in a way, micropolitical lens. Organizational change is defined here with Pettigrew as a process which refers to actions, reactions, and interactions. So you can see here a process perspective of the various interested parties as they negotiate around proposals for change. Continuing struggles for power and status are motive forces in the sense of Pettigrew. So just to keep it as this, very short demarcation only for the purposes of this presentation to get a common base of understanding. And then we can turn to the main question or the main theme of the workshop, the Betrieb as a corporate actor. I have to admit that I was not sure whether this is a serious question, because from a micropolitical perspective, this perspective as the corporation as a unified, homogeneous actor pursuing common goals seems very unrealistic. The micropolitical perspective is a strong challenge, a very strong challenge to this notion of the Betrieb. And why is it so? Political theories, particularly micropolitical theories, view organizations as an arena of very loosely coupled or connected actors with very diverse interests. And in addition to that, goals and interests are purposely fragmented by organizational structure, for example, functional or divisional demands. And it is assumed in this perspective that cooperation only arises when people get together with respect to specific issues. And one issue is organizational change, which is a topic of this presentation. And when we take this perspective and look on organizational change processes. Then organizational change appears what is called here as an autonomous political arena. Again, with diverse actors and interests like proponents, opponents of change, or bystanders, or implementers. I will come back to that. But the main point here is that in this perspective, we consider change as autonomous political arena. And that means the political character of change cannot be managed away. It is unavoidable. And this this argument, or this perspective as an autonomous or on an autonomous arena is due, or is rooted in the context, which is seen as imbued with high uncertainty and complexity, and disagreement about means and ends of the actors involved. I think we all know that. Theoretical background here, Sayed March, Pettigrew, or Günther Ortmann has done some work on this. And that means that unavoidably decisions are rooted in kind of negotiations and the use of power to solve problems, to come to collective behavior. So taken together, we see here, or the perspective on change is that neither a common goal nor unitary action can be assumed in change processes from this theoretical perspective. Then the question emerges, if it is unavoidable, is it destructive or constructive for collective action or collective change action in particular? And the answer is a clear yes and no. Some researchers in the field have always been very skeptical of political behavior, not the concept, but in reality of political behavior, and considered it as destructive. For example, Henry Mintzberg did so, Pfeffer partly did so. The fear is that political behavior will end up in what Henry Mintzberg called total political arena. That is a fight of all against all. And this, in the end, will be destructive for collective behavior, for a common or more common goals. Or Buchanan Batham called it a turf game, in the sense that's the same. In this intellectual context, micropolitical behavior and change processes is more or less always seen from a perspective of change resistance, which is considered illegitimate and selfish. And we have some findings, research findings, which support this, that resistance in change processes and micropolitical tactics which support resistance are in a kind foster selfishness. On the other hand, researchers also have seen micropolitical behavior and tactics as constructive, as a social facilitator, or as Van der Veen put it, a motor of change. Günther Ortmann did so, Pettigrew, and I myself also. We studied micropolitics and organizational change, not only from the perspectives that resistance might be bad in a way, but also that resistance, for example, might be constructive. And then the notion arises that resistance may be a productive use of power and tactics, micropolitical tactics, as a resource of change. For example, when we look at political relations or exchange relations between change agents and resistors, this balance, or this relationship which may be fragile, this relationship has a potential to sharpen the quality of change initiatives, of intended solutions. and can be used as a means to combine, for example, self-interest and organizational interests. So there is still the ambivalence on the side of the scientific discourse. Micropolitics can be destructive and can be constructive for collective change behavior, change action, or for pursuing common goals in change processes. Just to show one empirical study, Buchanan surveyed 252 middle and senior managers, and you see here the ambivalence perceived by the practitioners themselves. 79% here agreed it is useful, or politics can be used to initiate and drive useful change initiatives. But in the same survey, 93% agreed with the statement that politics can be used to slow down and block useful change initiatives. So the ambivalence in the scientific discourse is also mirrored by the practitioners themselves. When we zoom in on more empirical findings in this research field, what we see is more or less a focus on tactics. This is due to the micro, in the micro political analysis, to the micro level, which is focused on individual behavior or segments of individual behavior in terms of tactics, more or less. And Buchanan Betrieb give a nice overview of the tactics which have been studied, like issue selling, that is a bottom-up tactic to influence the contents of change, or negotiation tactics in combination with coalition tactics. These are tactics to get resources in the change process. Or what is very interesting, shaming and blaming tactics have been studied, particularly with respect to change failure, why change failure was unavoidable and the managers involved has nothing to do with it, or timing tactics, how to start and terminate change. So this is a focus of micropolitical research in the context of change processes, and often also with a associated with a focus on resistance, not always, but very often. On the other hand, we also have from the mainstream literature, or mainstream research, as I would call it, with a strong management stance, also in the mainstream literature, the political character of change processes, particularly of certain roles, has been demonstrated, I think, unintendedly so. For example, the change implementer role described by Kanter and studied by Kanter, or the power promoter role often studied by Hauschild and Gemünden, or the network builder role of change agents studied by Battiana. All these roles have some aspects of political behavior. For example, the implementer role is meant to get acceptance of change initiatives vis-a-vis the losers of change. The network builder role is more or less a role behind the scenes in fostering coalitions, in getting resources for the change initiatives and for making change work. And so even from the mainstream literature, we see the political character and the differentiation of actors and roles. And yeah, some words about the claims of the actors. What I find interesting is that we see in the empirical research, and in my own research also, that it is not only the personal benefit of like income, status, or career, which are relevant claims in change processes, but it is also the struggle for the right to govern, that is a kind of legitimacy on the side of the acting managers. They strive for legitimacy to govern the process. They strive to influence the rules of the game and the issue itself, of course. So this is a matter of framing. We had this in the last presentation. Ideology is a matter of, in a kind of matter of framing. The claim of change actors is to frame change in a certain way. For example, what is right sizing? What is downsizing? What is a proper personnel selection? What is digitization at its core? This is contested, and there are also claims which are posed or which actors struggle for, which they want to define in the field. So when we take that together, the conceptual perspectives, empirical findings, well, this is a strong challenge to the notion of the Betrieb as a collective actor with unified or common goals. I would suggest to think of collective change action as a behavior that emerges from distributed actors and roles, perhaps a polyphonic social form of life, and it is contested, certainly contested, and involves multiple actors and multiple roles, and out from that, collective change action and behavior may emerge, or the failure of change may emerge.
We have another 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
yeah, that's okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm already at the point of future research. Some of you may know that I've studied change coalitions for a while, and it's not surprisingly that I suggest to focus on coalitions, on change coalitions in the future research as a bridge between the micro and macro level of political analysis in organizations. Why is it? Because the micro analytical and the micro perspective on politics in organizations is a real micro perspective. That means most of the research is focused on segments of behavior, on tactics, as you've seen. And I would suggest to focus more on configurations of actors in specific context. Configuration is different from studying single actors and then adding it or puzzle the picture together. A configuration is a network, in a way, of actors with maybe precarious balances among them. And the concept of coalition is able to grasp these precarious balances, the different interests, the fact that interests are partly overlapping but not identical, and how difficult it is to form a social entity, as it were, that will act as a collective social entity within organizations, pursuing at least 1 or 2, 3 common goals with respect to change initiatives. Yeah, I leave it at this. To conclude, the perspective, the micropolitical perspective, really is a serious challenge to the Betrieb, as you posed it. A unitary integrated collective actor, we would say no from this perspective. Worth to mention that from this perspective, political behavior and the political nature of change cannot be managed away. And my suggestion to focus more on configurations and not only on individual behavior and individual tactics.